You are listening to the Shopify Solutions Podcast, a podcast for Shopify store owners that brings you concrete examples on how to build and grow your e-commerce brand. Your host is Scott Austin. He owns a Shopify agency called Jade Puma. In this podcast, Scott will share his e-commerce insights and best practices with you.
Hey everyone, Scott Austin here, and this week on the podcast, I want to talk about SMS, but I really don't know that much about SMS. Most of my clients are doing email, and we're using Klaviyo for email. So I wanted to bring in an expert in SMS who's also an expert in email, so we can compare and contrast the two there. But we're bringing in Nikita Vakrushev from Aspects. Welcome, Nikita.
Thanks for having me on, Scott. I'm excited to talk about all things SMS and email as well.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and Aspects so we understand your expertise?
Yeah, Aspect's been around for around 4 years, actually 5 years now. It started out originally as a full-service e-commerce growth agency, if you want to call it that, where we handled email, SMS, Facebook ads, Google ads, TikTok, socials, sometimes even websites and landing pages. Eventually in 2021 and halfway through 2022, we're like, okay, cool. Like, we're all burnt out by trying to manage all these different services. So we're like, okay, which one are we the best at? Which one clients stay on for the longest? And email tended to be that one. So we pivoted into email and SMS around like early 2022 and basically stopped taking on any more paid ads clients. And pretty much by the end of 2022, we were solely email and SMS. And we've been doing that ever since. We now have about 6 people on staff and crushing it for our clients.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. As a small agency, I'm a small agency also, and we only do Shopify. We only do one theme, right? And we're very focused on what we do, which makes us really good at it. But it also means, we're not your Swiss Army knife. We can't service all your needs. And it sounds like you're doing the same thing, focusing on a niche and becoming a deep expert in that for your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And the great thing is, like, even though we're not a Swiss Army knife, we still have a Swiss Army knife of partners that we can refer our clients over to that are highly vetted. And if they need help with landing pages, I got a landing page guy. If they need help with like 3PL and warehousing, I got a guy for that. So it really helps it out. And it also positions us as like an authority in the space because specialists tend to know exactly what they're doing and can help fix the problem a lot quicker. You don't go to a general practitioner to get a heart surgery. You go to a cardiologist. So yeah, it's been a lot nicer going in only on one niche.
Yeah. Oh, and what I love being so focused is you really understand the details and nuances of things, so you can really help your clients out with that kind of stuff. Now, as we're going to talk about SMS today, can you give us like a little bit of an overview on some stats or some data that explains like what the trends are with SMS, how important it is in your direct engagement with your customers, mix, and why people should be thinking about it?
Yeah, I'd say right now, if you were to ask me this question a year ago, I'd say like everyone's on board and happy with SMS and like it's a great tool. Now with having a lot more data and current state of the economy, it's a lot pricier to manage than email, and it has a little bit more boundaries as far as messaging. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with Shaft. I forgot what the S stand for, but like there's firearm, tobacco, and just like you can only use certain words. So basically the current state of SMS is we're seeing a lot of brands pull back on regular sends, so like weekly sends or monthly sends, and more so focusing that spend on big product launches, big sales periods. Like I know Prime Day or Prime Weekend is coming up in July. Like we'll probably be doing that, and Black Friday and Cyber Monday, because it's just so expensive to manage at a high scale. And if you're a bigger brand, sometimes a send could cost you like $3,000 or $4,000 depending on how many contacts you have, and sometimes you get that money back, sometimes you don't, and it all depends on certain factors.
So the expense comes from the service side of things, not from the labor side of things?
Yeah, the service side, because it's about a penny per subscriber per send. So if you have like a list of 20,000 people, like it gets really expensive really quickly. We had a client recently that had like a $25,000 SMS bill, and it's like, holy shit. Yeah. So yeah, in that case, they're like, hey, how do we pull this back? Because our Klaviyo bill was like 30 grand this month. It's like, whoa.
Now, when people are thinking about SMS and email, well, let's just take, and everybody's numbers are different. I get that. But if you were to guess, the average percentage of revenue that comes from email and SMS, like, how can we think about what our lift might be if we add SMS, or if we're doing well, what we should be getting from SMS from a percentage standpoint?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. I would say the benchmark that we look for on email is anywhere between 20 to 30% of revenue coming in from email. So if the brand's doing like $200,000 a month, they're bringing in anywhere between 40 to 60 from email specifically, and then SMS adds in anywhere between 5 to 10% on top of that. So it's an extra like 10 to 20 grand per month from SMS, like in that example. At least that's like what we've experienced. We haven't seen any brands that are super SMS heavy, like where majority of the revenue is coming in from SMS. Mainly email is the big driver there, because not only is it free, it's more accessible. Everyone has an email, whereas SMS, you're a little bit limited on the specific carriers that you're using or where the person is located. So it's a lot more expensive to send to Canada, Australia, Britain, and like all the other Western countries.
Yep. Yep. Now, so what I heard you say is if you add SMS, everybody's numbers are different, of course, but you can see like a 20% lift on your email revenue, which is significant.
Yeah, 20% lift on like retention if you were to like put it all in one bucket.
Yep. Now, if you were to contrast SMS with email, what is like the differences in SMS that store owners need to be thinking about as they're going to implement an SMS program?
Yeah, solid question. I think the biggest misconception in, I guess, like retention marketing is that SMS is just another shorter version of email. So, like, whatever email that you're sending out, it's just like, all right, like, let's just shorten this down to a tweet, basically 120 characters, and then send it out. But it's actually a little bit different. So, the way I like to see SMS is it's a very personal channel. You're reaching to someone directly on their phone, and for me, my phone is like an extension of myself. If you're getting really abstract here, because it's like an extension of my memory. I don't have to remember my phone numbers. I have to remember my calendar. But in the same sense, when you're reaching out to someone personally, the thing that I see most brands miss is they're very just like, hey, we have a sale, or like, hey, we have a product launch. It's not personalized, nor does it have like personality in the text that you send. Like whatever brand language that you're using has to match what you're sending in SMS. Otherwise, it's not going to work as well. Like obviously, like if you're sending out an SMS to a brand or from a brand that has like a very female heavy customer base, like you probably lean towards that. Or if it's like a male heavy, like I'm sure the SMS messages that you get from Manscaped are completely different from the SMS messages you get from Glossier. So in those types of scenarios, like you kind of have to adjust your messaging to be very brand heavy, very personal. And sometimes it doesn't have to be super professional. It could be like, hey girl, I'm just checking in on you. Saw you were looking at this and noticed you didn't check out. Like it could be something as silly as that could make the difference in performance, because it's a very personal channel. And when you personalize it and cater to the audience, they tend to reciprocate back.
So the channel is more informal in communication than email is one of the differences. Interesting. Now, when it comes to implementing SMS, in Shopify stores, which is what, this podcast is all about, there are multiple ways that there are multiple providers for SMS. What are the pros and cons? How should we look at it? All my clients, we just use Klaviyo for email. Should they be using Klaviyo for SMS, or should you separate your email from your SMS platform and have different providers for those things? How do you make that platform choice?
Yeah, that is a difficult one, especially with all these new platforms coming out. And they're like, hey, we can get lower rates. So like that works with email, but with SMS, it's a little bit different because most SMS platforms are built on the same sort of network because they're using Twilio, whereas like you can make differences in email. So SMS is a bit different in that sense. One, like the big three is like Klaviyo SMS, PostScript, and Attentive. I wouldn't use Attentive. I would probably avoid using Attentive at all costs. A few reasons for that is because they lock you in a contract. And once you want to leave the Attentive platform, they make it super, super hard for you to extract your data, as in like the people that subscribe to you, or even transfer your phone number. So if you're on Attentive, I would definitely look into seeing how you can switch or when your contract period ends, because that is worth it. The platform is okay, but it's just, I don't like having that kind of level of control on me and our clients. Postscript's a great option. I think Postscript is a solid option as far as like the functionality that they have, the messaging features that they have, as well as the customer back and forth that you can do with live agents within Postscript. So I think Postscript is an amazing option if you're not going with Klaviyo. And then Klaviyo, if you're already running email on Klaviyo, SMS is also a good option to just add on because you already have the data being warehoused within Klaviyo of like user activity or like what the user has looked at, or if they looked at a collection, or if they looked at specific products. So you have all that existing data. So it's a lot easier to pre-populate that data and sort of plug into Klaviyo, making it almost stupid easy to just set up your flows or send out campaigns.
So I'm hearing if Klaviyo, no brainer, use it for SMS.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then if not Klaviyo, you have other options to consider and other options to avoid. And I love the fact that you're willing to say, do not use these people for this reason.
We've had so many headaches over the last few years where like the client's like, hey, we're unattentive. And it's like, oh, great. And it's like, we're paying $1,000 a month just to use the platform. I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like, yeah, we're just paying $1,000 a month. I'm like, well, Klaviyo SMS is kind of free. And at the same time, you only pay for the credits that you use. So there's number one. And number two, it's like, all right, let's switch to Klaviyo. And it's like, well, our contract doesn't end until like March. And we're talking in like November. And it's like, what do you mean your contract? I didn't know about this until I've gone through this like 5 different times. So I don't want that to happen to other brands and other agencies in the space. Even then, like I have a lot of brand related friends like that run their own brand. In secret talks, they're all shit talking attentive in a way. So I don't think it may be news, but I don't know.
Well, most people aren't public about don't do this, which, like I said, I totally appreciate that. Can you explain a little bit about the legal differences or the opt-in differences, the requirements between SMS opt-in and email opt-ins?
Yeah. The biggest difference is you have to have double opt-in or like double consent on SMS. So with email, all you have to do is, like, let's say you sign up through a pop-up. For the most part, outside of the EU and GDPR compliance, you don't need to have a secondary opt-in. You can just send them an email because their consent was done through them typing out their email and submitting the form. Whereas with SMS, they type that phone number in and then they get a text message and you have to say like yes, or like reply with yes or reply with subscribe to make sure that you are getting consent to message them. If you don't have that double consent or the double opt-in, then you're not going to send any SMS messages to them. Like the carrier will just block you. And if you try to skirt around it and just like re-import a list, the carriers are pretty quick to just shut you down completely and shut down your number, and you won't be able to SMS message anyone else.
Now, just so it's clear, if I've been running a Shopify store for 10 years and I've got, phone numbers turned on for customer accounts, all those phone numbers aren't good until I turn on this double opt-in factor, right?
I would say you should be able to message them as long as they've consented. If they haven't, then you would have to go through a different process. And in that process, it just comes down to sending out another message of like, hey, you're still on our list. You still want to be subscribed? Yes or no? And like, that's the only message you can send out to double confirm that they're consent, or like they've consented to receiving SMS communication.
So there is a way to tap into your existing phone numbers in your customer records if you use that method.
Yeah, exactly. It's just the likelihood of that working is very low. We actually had a potential client come by. He's a local guy, asking. He's like, "Hey, we have 300,000 phone numbers that we collected 5 years ago. Can we still use them?" And I'm like, "No, you're gonna have to go through a huge consent process. Importing that list is going to be a pain in the ass, and getting reconsent on that is not only going to be expensive because that's a lot of contacts and a lot of sends, and the ROI is just not going to make any sense because it's like, all right, cool, you spent like 15 or 30 grand just to make sure you got consent. If not, like, how many of those people are actually going to consent? And then it's like, all right, cool, how do we make sales from this?
Building trust in your store is essential, but let's be honest. Most trust badge apps make your store look worse, not better. Their badges clash with your brand and give your store a Frankenstein-like feel. That's why we built Badzilla, the Shopify app that delivers trust badges that seamlessly match your brand. Originally crafted for our private clients. Badgezilla was so successful, we turned it into an app for every Shopify store. With Badgezilla, you'll access hundreds of badges, all customizable to your brand guidelines, making them a natural part of your customer experience. Place badges on product pages, collection pages, the home page, and more. Take it a step further with conditional logic. Show a Made in Canada badge only on products made in Canada, or tailor badges to highlight your unique selling points. And the best part, Badgezilla comes with a robust, always free plan so you can start building trust, risk-free. Transform trust into conversions with Badgezilla.
Let's say I'm a small Shopify store. I got email working. I'm making X amount of revenue. I got a list of X size, and you're going to define X here in a second so you'll understand. How do I get started? When is the right time to think about adding SMS to my tool set? Is it when I hit a certain revenue point? Is it when I hit a certain list size? Is it some other factor that I'm not thinking about?
I would say start yesterday. That's like the best answer.
So, well, let me summarize that. What you're saying is SMS is a no-brainer for e-commerce brands.
I guess let me dive into the answer. It's a yes and a no, basically. So the reason why I say start yesterday is because once you, like we talked about like 5 minutes ago, like SMS consent is super important and you need to have that double opt-in. So what I mean by start yesterday is like start collecting phone numbers and getting that consent yesterday. So you may not be in a right position right now to start sending out blasts and whatnot, but at least you have those phone numbers and they've consented. So that way you have at least a list building up, because we've had clients that we've signed on and they're like, yeah, we don't think we're going to do SMS for the foreseeable future. And it's like, yeah, totally get that. We'll still have this set up. So that way you're still collecting phone numbers and you're getting that consent, because it's relatively inexpensive to, if you already have Klaviyo, just add it on. It's not going to be a big part of your bill. But then come to find out a year later, they're like, you know what, let's give SMS a try. And it's like, well, great. It's a great thing we did that, because now we have like a list of 2,000 people that we can message via SMS. So start getting that consent as soon as possible. And then when you are ready, or when you think you're ready to invest into that channel, you at least have the data to do so. Because we have also had the chance, or we had the flip side happen where they're like, oh, we're ready to start SMS. It's like, okay, cool. How big's your list? They're like, well, we don't have a list. It's like, well, we're going to need to wait another few months before we can actually start and build up that list. As far as tiers and like contact sizes, I think as soon as you have like 500 to 1,000 SMS messages, it would be a good start to like putting out either like bi-weekly or monthly SMS messages, just testing the waters and seeing how that performs and if the ROI is there. Or you can not send those campaigns out and just have SMS attached to your automations and your flows, welcome based flows, and following up with like any discount codes or any offers that you ran there, following up on abandoned checkout or abandoned browse or abandoned cart. Because as people are going through the shopping experience, you're already collecting their phone number, and ideally they should have consented during that process. So then you can message them back and forth in an automated fashion. And if they don't have SMS or if they don't have consent, they just skip and they go straight to email. So I think those are the two paths that I would take.
Yeah, so I'm hearing a 3-step progression. So let me just summarize what I think you're saying, and you can tell me if I'm right or not. Step 1, collect consent for phone numbers. And there's a bunch of different ways to do that. You can do that in Shopify checkout. You can do that in your Klaviyo pop-ups or whatever other pop-ups you're using, but start collecting a list. When your list gets to a certain size, you said 500 to 1,000, then you start trickling SMS in to your flows, because those are already things that are set up and working. You're just going to increase, hopefully, the touch points you're making during those flows. And then you get a feel for how that works. And then you can start doing dedicated campaigns through SMS.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Okay. That makes total sense.
I was talking in mazes.
Well, no, it was clear. I just like summarizing it because we all think in slightly different ways, right?
Yeah.
Now, if I was, if you were to give me some best practices, things you should definitely be doing in SMS, you've already given a couple of those. What are some things that people need to be thinking about as they're implementing their SMS program?
There's a few things to consider. So similar to how you have the subject line in emails, it's like the thing that hooks the reader in. You kind of have the same thing on SMS messages where the text preview or the notification drop down, like if you're using your phone or if you get a notification, you pick your phone up, you have the the preview text right below like the phone number, I would optimize for that because that optimizes for opens. Making it personal, including their first name if you can, or collecting their first name in like the pop-up step, because then with that personalization, they're more likely to open it because like anything, it's like, oh, hey Scott, it's like, of course you're going to open it. Or if I get a hey Nikita, I'm going to open it. So collecting or utilizing personalization and first names. If you can't do first names, then you could do something more day of the week related. It's like, hey, it's Thursday, or like something Thursday or something Wednesday. Like you can have those custom tags of current day. I think it's like bracket, current day, bracket. So you can use that as a personalization because like, oh, it is Thursday and there's a Thursday text. So there's some context there. So optimizing for that first line, utilizing emojis, using them, but also using them sparingly. Using them in that first line helps with open rates. And then using them in call to actions like, hey, click the link below to get whatever discount or whatever offer you're sending out. And try to structure it in a sandwich way. So you have that first intro, or like the preview text / intro. Then you have the body of the text. Try to keep it to a sentence max. Like if it's a BOGO 30 deal, then you just talk about the information about the deal. And then have the call to action at the bottom with just a link of like, hey, click here to get the deal or whatever. And then within that link, one thing we also optimize for is including the discount code in the URL just to reduce friction at checkout. I don't know if that's something that you guys implement, but that's something that's worked really, really well for us. Is on every single email that we include a discount code or an offer, we try to embed that discount code into the URL itself. Because that, otherwise, like you click the link, you go to checkout, and it's like, oh, I got to grab that coupon code, go back to text, and then it's like, oh, my friend texted me, and then I get distracted, and then I don't finish checking out. So, yeah, that's the few things I'd look out for on the SMS side.
Yeah, no, I love embedding the discount code in the URL. We actually built ourselves a little tool that we use where we put in the URL, the discount code, and the destination URL we want them to land on, right? And if you want them to add the product to the cart automatically, so you just put in what variables you want, and it gives you the URL you want. Because those, helping customers that way is super handy because, going back and forth between screens, especially on a phone, for people like me at least, is a nightmare.
We have the same thing built out in like Google Sheets where it's just all like different concatenate like functions and all that.
So those are good best practices. Are there things we need to be thinking about to reduce opt-outs, and is opt-out a problem in SMS?
I think the biggest issue that I see when with people unsubscribing or opting out of SMS is when you message them too much. Like it's similar to email. Like if you're messaging someone every single day, your unsubscribe rates are going to be high. Same thing with SMS. Like if you're sending SMS messages like multiple times a week, then it can get a little tricky. Depending on the list size, we try to do once every other week. The list size is bigger and we can segment further, then we can do one every week or multiple times a week. But when you're sending out SMS messages on a daily or on a weekly or on like a very short period of time, like you're going to have high unsubscribe rates. And at that point, you're kind of eating your list alive or I guess cannibalizing your list because your unsubscribe rate is outpacing your subscribe rate. And at that point is when I would slow it down. I would at least want to have like 10 to 20% growth rate with my SMS list on a monthly basis because the brand is growing, you want a bigger list. So if unsubscribes are outpacing your subscribes, then I would pause it or just reduce that time that you're sending.
Yep, that makes total sense. Now, what are some worst practices that you see happen? What things should people avoid doing?
I've never had that question asked, actually, so I'm trying to figure out some examples. Probably like sending a photo in every single message, not necessarily because it's a bad tactic, but because it's very expensive. It adds an extra like couple cents to your bill, so like it may not be the biggest impact. Man, I haven't thought of like worst practices because most of the times that we take over SMS, it's just like they don't even do it, or if they're doing it, it's just very basic. Probably like going back to the point I made earlier of like not personalizing it or just like speaking specifically from like a brand tone and like it's like brand to person rather than person to person. I think those are like the only ones I could come up with on the top of my head.
That makes sense. Now, how do you measure? You've given a couple things that you're looking about. Is there a specific way that you're measuring SMS performance? Because unlike email, I'm hearing from you that cost is actually a really big factor. So you got to be thinking about how much money it's making versus how much it's costing you. And you've also got the, growth, the subscription growth rate being net positive or net negative and those kind of things. What sort of metrics are you looking at when you're managing an SMS, system for a client?
Yeah, the biggest one is click-through rate. Open rates are already baseline high. Like they're anywhere between 85 to 95%. So like it's a very high open rate channel. But the click rate is the one that tends to not perform the best. And obviously, like the higher click-through rate, the more people visiting the website, the more chances you get to retarget them, and then the higher likelihood they'll purchase. So I think the biggest one is just how do we increase that click-through rate? And that just comes down to the call to action side. So just getting click-through rate above 3 to 4%, if not higher than that on SMS would be ideal. And the other metrics that we look at outside of like subscribes and unsubscribes is just the revenue rate. We want to make sure that every SMS that we send has potential to outperform the amount that we spend. So if we spent like $500 on a send, that SMS has to do at least $1,500, because then you're subtracting the cost of running it and then also subtracting like cost of goods and shipping and all the other business expenses. Because like you could have an SMS that you sent out for $500 and it made you $1,000, but with the margins of the business that actually went negative. So those are some other things that we consider.
Wow. What I'm surprised by there is your ROI, can be similar to ads, just because of the cost, right?
Yeah.
Not a cost of acquisition, but the cost of delivery is so high as a percentage of revenue, depending on all these different variables we're talking about, that you really have to be conscious of that and not bankrupt yourself.
That's what happened with us with that client that spent like 30 grand on Klaviyo last month, where they spent 25K on SMS and they only made like 18 grand with SMS. And it was just like, I mean, they were in charge of the SMS. They were a consulting client. So like we were just pointing them in the right direction. But yeah, they're like, yeah, we should probably slow down on the SMS.
Yeah. So as a small Shopify brand listening to us right now, and they're like, oh, this sounds great, I want to get into SMS. What are the ways that they can think about doing it? Is this something they can do themselves to start off with? Should they hire an agency to start off with? Or is there a do-it-yourself phase that converts to an agency phase later on? And like, what are the factors they should be thinking about when they're making those decisions?
Yeah, I think any brand sub 100K a month should just do it on their own. And like, this is just coming from a point of like, I don't really care about taking your money. Like, I'm just thinking about like the best for the business. Cause like we can manage your SMS for you, but I don't think it'll bring in ROI that would make sense. I think until you hit like mid 7-figure, like a year range, where it would make sense to offload, because once you have the automations and flow set up for the SMS side, like you don't really have to worry about that. And if you're only sending out one SMS a week, I mean, for the most part, like you could just do that with ChatGPT. And if you want to make a quick graphic, you can use your graphic designer that's in-house. Or if you don't even have that one, you can just use Canva to create like a small little photo that you can use on SMS. So I think until you want to buy back the time and the mental headache that it takes you to operate SMS, then it would make sense for an agency. Or if the agency that you're using for other retention, like email marketing, handles SMS for you, then at that point, it's like, yeah, sure, I'll just give you guys the SMS. Because then it's like one less thing you have to think about. So yeah, I'd probably say like for most stores, just do it yourself, because it's very simple as far as just setting it up, writing the messaging, and sending it out. At most, if you're not sure on what's going on, have an agency audit the brand and see if like there's anything that's being done wrong on the SMS side, and go from there.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. Is there any last advice you have for people that we haven't talked about, or do you want to like summarize, what their SMS strategy or focus should be?
I would say just keep it simple. Try to collect those SMS numbers as soon as possible. I would layer on an extra discount if you can. If you can't, then I would just say like join the SMS club in like your pop-up or something like that. Keep it personal and try to watch those numbers carefully. Just do like a monthly report and see how much you spent on SMS, how much has it brought in. And if it makes financial sense, great. If not, don't do it. I guess one other thing I forgot to mention earlier is depending on the brand that you're running and depending on the average order value that you're bringing in for every purchase, it may or may not make sense to use SMS continuously. One thing that we've noticed over the last like 3 or 4 years now, is with higher AOV brands, SMS tends to taper off in performance, meaning not as many people are making impulse decisions off of a text message that they just got to buy something that's like $350. So like anything above $150 to $200, we notice that the performance of SMS doesn't justify the spend on SMS. It makes sense during high sales periods like Black Friday, Cyber Monday, or Christmas. In the off season, it just doesn't make sense because even for a product of like that costs like $400, like if I'm buying a kayak, I'm going to do my research on kayaks, and a simple text isn't going to convert me. Versus like if I'm buying like lip gloss for my girlfriend, and it's like $45, and it's like, okay, cool, I'll just go off this text and buy it because there's a sale going on. So that's just another thing to consider is like, what's your average order value? And if it's in a higher ticket range, then I would tread carefully with using SMS.
Yeah, all good advice there. Thanks for that. Now, if people want to reach out to you to learn more about you or Aspect, how do they do that?
Yeah, best place is just our website. It's aspectagency.com, ASPEKT agency.com. I also publish YouTube videos on a weekly basis going over email, SMS, deliverability, basically all things retention and strategies that we utilize internally. I also publish like daily posts on LinkedIn, so you can follow me there. And if you want to see my personal life, it's just my Instagram. So it's just my name, Nikita Vakrushev, and you can find me there.
Excellent. Thanks for your time and expertise today, Nikita.
Appreciate it, Scott. Have a good one.
You've been listening to the Shopify Solutions podcast with Scott Austin. This podcast is brought to you by Jade Puma, a Shopify-focused agency located in San Diego, California. If you like what you heard, please leave a review and subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to work with Scott on your brand, email him at scott@jadepuma.com.